Bartholomew Town is brought to you in part by the University of Rhode Island Online, Navigant Credit Union, the Audubon Society of Rhode Island, Newport Film, and Half Street Group.
Bartholomew Town.
Are you looking to advance in your career or explore a new field? The University of Rhode Island now offers a comprehensive portfolio of fully online programs designed to bring world-class education to you anytime, anywhere. Choose from a wide range of flexible, asynchronous programs in business and leadership, data, tech and STEM, healthcare and pharmacy, marine and environmental science, and more. With expert faculty and innovative courses, you'll gain the skills and knowledge to thrive in today's competitive world. Are you ready to take the next step? Visit uri.edu/online and discover how URI Online can help you achieve your goals. URI Online, learn anywhere with us. Let's talk about the situation with the unhoused here in Rhode Island. Bill Bartholomew here with you on Bartholomew Town at ripodcast.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, so it's a situation that clearly, I mean, we can go all the way back to the origins of organized society, and there has always been an element, no matter what structure of power is in place, no matter what system is in place, there's always been an element of people who either by choice or by falling through the cracks are in some way left behind. But when we talk about our contemporary society here in the United States, here in Rhode Island for that matter, and you think about the fact that we're, the wealthiest nation of all time, and we're at a point where, albeit at end stage capitalism, we're still functioning in a society that is producing wealth, that is producing wealth for individuals, corporations, governments, so on and so forth. And the idea that we could have a situation here in Rhode Island playing out right now where we have people on a night where the last couple of nights, I mean, I don't know what the exact temperature was, but we're talking about at minimum with wind chill, with real field temperatures, however you want to frame it. We're talking about temperatures in the teens with the wind blowing. We just had a little bit of a snowstorm here on this Thursday morning as I'm recording it. It is wholly unacceptable that anybody in the state of Rhode Island right now who is unhoused, who wants to have a bed, that wants to have a warm place to go, doesn't have it. Now, let's frame this carefully. We can go back a couple of years. Remember the protest on the State House Esplanade, the camp out there, Matt Brown coming down from the East Side Mansion for a couple of hours. But more than anything, it was the actual advocates and the unhoused in those tents in that encampment that both on a practical basis had a place to go, albeit still in the elements, outdoors and tents. But more than anything, what was it? It was a protest. It was a demonstration. It was a chance to show decision makers and, frankly, I think the general public, people who are well aware that there's a large swath of the population, and by large, let's be honest about it, we're not talking about 10% of the population or something like that, but enough where it's a disturbing number of people who simply don't have anywhere to go, who desire to have somewhere to go, and by decree, via statute, by decree, via a social compact that I think still exists, even when you take a look around you and you see, boy, there's so much inequity, does it even matter anymore? In any scenario, you had people, well over 1,000 people reportedly, on any given night in the state of Rhode Island who wanted somewhere to go, and they didn't have anywhere to go. And that goes back now, 3-4 years from that, I think it was 3 years ago, right? The State House Esplanade camp out protest. So I think that was the type of thing that certainly raised the issue to another level of urgency, both from the standpoint of a public relations deal, but also just from an awareness and an action, or I should say required action standpoint, okay? Here today, we take a look at a situation where, look, the amount of people on any given night who are unhoused in Rhode Island right now, the system itself, okay, the coordinated entry system managed by the Rhode Island Coalition to End Homelessness, there were significant problems earlier this week where you had people waiting 2.5 hours to get through, and then they'd get through only to find out that there was nowhere to go. And on just a basic level, you hear that, you talk to people experiencing that, you talk to advocates, and you talk to people in, we'll call it the social justice industry, You talk to political leaders, and there's just a sense of, geez, I mean, how is this possible? First of all, it's not like this should be a surprise. It gets cold in New England. And in January, February, it gets particularly cold. So we've seen this coming. Every year it happens. The same thing is going to happen on a meteorological level, regardless of climate change or whatever. It's going to happen. And we simply were not ready again. Now, you've got the new housing secretary, Deborah Goddard. Both she and the executive director of the Rhode Island Coalition to End Homelessness, Kim Simmons, appeared separately on WPRO on the radio on the afternoon show earlier this week. And you get to a point where, first of all, Goddard, new housing secretary, she's got to do a better job on the radio. Okay, she's got to come out, and part of that role needs to be being able to effectively and in a commanding sense, not an academic sense, in a commanding sense, say, hey, here's the problems that we've identified. Here's the problems that have been identified for us. And here's what we're doing now. And here's our action plan. You don't want to give dates certain? Fine. We've seen how date certain can be a problem with the Washington Bridge. You know, they tell you a couple of months from now something's going to happen and it doesn't happen. Now you got an even bigger problem. But she needs to get better at simply, it's not about empathy. It's none of that. It's just simply about delivering information in a way that instills, I should say, confidence in from the general public in the Department of Housing, in the housing secretary herself, and in the administration, the McKee administration, and the state as a whole. But then you get Kim Simmons, the executive director of the Rhode Island Coalition to End Homelessness. She tells Dan York on the radio that she's been, and her organization has been reaching out to the McKee administration and the housing secretary's office, and they've had no interactions about these problems. Then I follow up with the housing secretary after that interview, and they say, oh, no, that's not true. We've had staff level interactions. In any case, there's been a clunkiness and there's been a fall down around the coordination, ironically, of the coordinated entry system, which ought to be called the discombobulated entry system at this stage. It's a number that you call if you're experiencing homelessness or you're expecting to experience a scenario where you're unhoused, and you get in, and ideally, within a couple of minutes, you're given, hey, pass or play. Here are your options for where you can go. Here is the availability of beds. Here's the ability of warming shelters. By the way, that number, 401-277-4316. 401-277-4316. Now, as I understand it, Dan York reported yesterday that the governor's office held a call with both the Rhode Island Coalition to End Homelessness Executive Director Simmons and the Housing Department to try to coordinate a little bit here and clean things up and figure out what the hell's going on. I mean, there's disputes, and this is always going to be the case. This has always happened where there's disputes about the coalition tells you that there's, I'm going to give you a random number, 450 people on a given night that are unsheltered. But because of a policy and procedure of not necessarily identifying where those people are staying or who they are, the administration, the government, they sit back and they say, well, we don't know for sure if what you're telling us is accurate. So it creates this dichotomy of where the information isn't being shared in a way that makes it easy for anybody to have a really clear and fluid and accurate picture of what's actually happening in our community. To count the number of people who are unhoused on any given night, it's an impossible task, but you can come pretty close. And that number, reported by the coalition, is inclusive of people who are unhoused by choice, and there are people who are in that category. And there are also people who are unhoused because they can't find somewhere to go, which is an outrageous, embarrassing situation. You know what it is? It tells you the priorities of the system that we're in. And of course, that number may be very low because there may be more people who are unaccounted for, whether they're encamped in the woods, whether they're in a downtown area. It could be Woonsocket, could be Westerly, could be West Warwick, could be South Kingstown, could be Providence, Newport, could be anywhere. So we don't actually really know how many people are unhoused on any given night in the state of Rhode Island right now. But I'd be willing to bet that any number that the coalition puts forth is actually an undercount, which tells you that when it comes to preparing and positioning the state to have sufficient warming shelters and beds, we got to do a much, much better job. Now, the McKee administration, they did open up some warming shelters and identify that with updates as new stuff has come online. I call it stuff because it's a variety of, some are actual warming shelters. Some are places you might be able to sleep. On the municipal level, there are some things happening. I know East Providence opened up their own. But here's the reality, folks. It's just not enough. And we have gotten to a point where it is totally and wholly unacceptable that a society as wealthy as ours, even if the system itself by design has winners and losers, because by design, that's what a capitalistic society is. Nonetheless, from, again, that social compact level and from the standpoint of, hey, even just preventing collapse, got to do a better job. Now, I do think that you hear, oh, McKee doesn't care about the home. That's totally not true. The guy definitely has a heart. The guy definitely wants the problem solved. The problem from an administrative standpoint is that they don't seem to have a grasp on the best way to do this. And again, it shouldn't be something that's being figured out in January and in the early January days where it's 16 degrees outside. And now you've got the housing secretary, a new housing secretary, Goddard, yesterday, Channel 10 reporting that she wants to sell the Charles Gate nursing home facility, which was just acquired by the state. She doesn't think the state should be, she comes out and says, we shouldn't be managing these types of properties. Managing these types of properties, open the place. Not to mention the Echo Village pallet shelters, which, look, you've got statutory limitations there. You've got a fire code. In the wake of the Station nightclub fire, one of the worst, if not the darkest days in Rhode Island history, and quite frankly, a horrendous incident on a global scale, we have a renewed and, at this point now 20-plus-year-old, sense of urgency around our fire codes and around those types of statutes. And that has been a problem for the tiny, the pallet shelters, the tiny houses they've got over there at near Hopkins Field off 146. And even that, if it went online, wouldn't be sufficient to solve all the problems. It would be another tool in the toolbox. So this idea also that there's going to be a state of emergency, Helena Bonanno folks running for governor, they want to call a public health emergency. She claims Connecticut did it. Connecticut didn't do that. Connecticut passed a law that has to do with health care options for people who are experiencing homelessness. The Connecticut never had the National Guard come in or anything like that. So you got all this political positioning around the crisis. You've got statutory prohibition when it comes to the Echo Village, the pallet shelters. They can't get them open because of the fire code. They had environmental remediation issues before. In tandem with a system that supposedly now, after this meeting that the governor held yesterday, virtually with the executive director of the coalition and the housing department, evidently now they've restored the coordinated entry system's operations, so it only takes a couple of minutes to get through, so on and so forth. But here's the thing. It is not enough, which brings me to the focus of this conversation today. In Providence, City Councilor Miguel Sanchez, along with City Councilor Justin Roias, did something that has actually, quite frankly, has been, I think, has been hugely instructive. Something that I think has been maybe, we'll see, but something that I think can be a big turning point in this entire crisis around our unhoused population in Rhode Island. They decided, knowing that there were simply not enough shelter beds, to go ahead and open up the Providence City Council chambers a couple of nights ago and do a pop-up homeless shelter. And then last night, they moved it up to the DaVinci Center for a similar effort. You had community members turn out. You had volunteers. You had people dropping off blankets and clothes. Okay? You had people from state representatives there. Evidently, on the first night at Providence City Hall, 32 people took advantage of that service. On a night, again, I don't know what the temperature was. Call it 16 degrees. That might be high. You wouldn't put your dog outside for 5 minutes in this weather.
Bartholomew Town.
Birds are disappearing from our landscape at a rapid pace. Over 1/3 of those breeding on Audubon Society of Rhode Island's wildlife refuges are in decline. Climate change has taken a toll on their migration, nesting, and food sources. While science is highlighting the problem, Audubon is working on real solutions with a plan to rapidly reduce their carbon emissions. The organization will be free of fossil fuels by 2030, with renewable energy powering Audubon's buildings, equipment, and vehicles. To shape our future, all of us must act. Learn more about repowering Audubon, their avian research, and how you can join their fight for climate resiliency. Visit asri.org/repower. Newport Film screens the latest, critically acclaimed documentary films year-round across Rhode Island. Like a film festival, Newport Film often gets early access to films before they're available online or in the theaters. Stay up to date on their latest screening events at newportfilm.com or on Instagram at newportfilm. Are you looking to advance in your career or explore a new field? The University of Rhode Island now offers a comprehensive portfolio of fully online programs designed to bring world-class education to you anytime, anywhere. Choose from a wide range of flexible, asynchronous programs in business and leadership, data, tech, and STEM, healthcare and pharmacy, marine and environmental science, and more. With expert faculty and innovative courses, you'll gain the skills and knowledge to thrive in today's competitive world. Are you ready to take the next step? Visit uri.edu/online and discover how URI Online can help you achieve your goals. URI Online, learn anywhere with us. Half Street Group brings a new generation's perspective to leadership communication, strategic public relations, and digital marketing. Half Street helps organizations and leaders take control of their own stories and manage their reputations. They get results for their clients by focusing on audience message and culture and by leveraging their decade-long relationship with media and opinion leaders in the Ocean State and throughout New England. Join me and Half Street Group founder and president Mike Roias for a conversation every month about news of the day, the hottest media analysis, and a look behind the scenes at how impactful leaders drive conversations. Learn more at halfstreetgroup.com. As Rhode Island's first ever member-owned credit union, Navigant Credit Union has been a staple in the local business community for more than 108 years. Today, Navigant is a $3.4 billion institution serving more than 136,000 members across 25 physical branch locations. But since its founding in 1915, the mission has never changed. Navigant Credit Union's team of financial professionals have remained committed to improving the financial well-being of the families, businesses, and communities they serve across Rhode Island. Learn more at navigantcu.org. Now, Mayor Smiley's reaction was, well, this is an offensive thing. It's offensive to our community partners who do such a wonderful job and have a professionalism around the crisis of the unhoused, and this is what City Hall should be. And you know what? Yeah, City Hall shouldn't be a shelter. It doesn't have, you want to talk about fire codes, you want to talk about security, you want to talk about medical, whatever the case may be. Sure, that's true. It's not set up for that. Nor, I don't even know if you could make the argument that DaVinci Center is set up for that anyway either. From an occupancy standpoint. So Smiley's not happy about it. Other people in government not happy about it. And it's being sort of dismissed as by some of the officialdom as, well, it's just a political show. It's just a protest. And, it is true. We don't know those 32 people that were at that shelter at City Hall. We don't know if those people are folks who came from another location. I understand. I've spoken with people that the Mathewson Street Church right down the street was at capacity on the night of the Providence City Hall pop-up shelter. But we don't know if those 32 people are new people who would otherwise have been in the cold, or if they chose to come to that location instead of another location. At the end of the day, you know what? It doesn't matter. Because here's the thing. Kudos to Sanchez and Roias and all those volunteers that stood that up, and all those volunteers who made that thing happen and are now making it happen at the DaVinci Center, because what they did was holy punk rock anarcho-syndicalism in the face of a system that has failed a large swath of our population, period. And if we're going to assess this, it's a punk rock unhoused shelter pop up at City Hall, period. And you know what? Even if you want to say it's just a demonstrative, you want to call it a protest, fine. You want to call it a demonstration, fine. You want to call it direct action, well, you can call it whatever you want. But here's the thing. We can go back through grassroots movements. We can go back. We can look at the Spanish Civil War. We can go all the way back to biblical times, or whatever you want to call it. We can go all the way back to a hunter-gatherer era. In a contemporary or more contemporary sense, we can take a look at the social movements that took place in our country. Abolition, suffrage for women, various degrees of anti-war protest, various degrees of racial equity protest. And by protest, I don't mean standing there with a sign. I mean long-term peaceful action that has led to a renewed sense of purpose and has informed officialdom about what the people want. I mean, we could have had it with Occupy Wall Street, but they got to us. You know, they turned Saturday Night Live, oh, ha, 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 it's a bunch of idiots out in the park, CNN, all these, all the corporate media, they turned it into, oh, this is a joke, look at this, let's go now to Battery Park in the financial district where, some kids are camping out and they're angry because they don't have money and all these other people have money and, the system just went belly up, but, and everyone's got student loans, but, ha, 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 this is just a joke. Yeah, except for it wasn't a joke. They made it into a joke because they knew that what Occupy Wall Street was about was undercutting their profit model and their worldview in a way that was irrecoverable had it taken on the level of life form that it possibly could have. We're going to go back to Washington, D.C., not Congress, not the White House, not the Supreme Court, not some lobbyist firm. We're going to go back to 1980s. We're going to talk about Discord records. We're going to talk about Henry Rollins. We're going to talk about Black Flag. We're going to talk about Fugazi, Bad Brains. You want to understand what's happening and why the Providence City Hall shelter matters. In part, you got to look at, yes, social justice movements and human rights movements throughout history, including those in the last century in our country. George Floyd. But you also got to look at 1980s Washington, D.C. punk rock. In the face of Reagan, in the face of a changing society, Reagan firing the air traffic controllers, the falsehood of trickle-down economics, and an environment on a creative level that had become wholly, if not entirely, on a professional and a corporate level anyway, glam. In the face of that, punk rock emerged in basements, it emerged in VFW halls, it emerged at certain sanctioned venues, if you will. And it borrows from a long-standing tradition of anarcho-syndicalism that, while not specifically in these cases tied to the advancement of trade unions, as earlier anarcho-syndicalism, particularly in Franco's Spain, would inform us. In this case, it's as simple as this. It's the people without a centralized government taking control of society and acting, taking action. Now, you can make the argument, well, you're using Providence City Hall, which is a facility based on organized society, based on a capitalistic system, based on a system of power and structure of power that is not what it's not like, a facility was constructed on the streets of Providence. You can make the argument that the encampment at the State House a couple of years ago was more anarcho because even though the Esplanade itself is part of state property, the facility of Providence City Hall is governmental, and it was fundamental to the execution of this homeless shelter. Sure. But the spirit is real. You can take that all the way through. You want to go to Chapel Hill, North Carolina? Late 1980s, early 90s. You want to go to, hey, I'll tell you right now, because I was there. You want to go to Brooklyn, New York? Early 2000s. You want to go out to the Oakland, California area? Right now, I got people in Chicago, close friends, who are making ovens out of clay and basically putting them around the city so that people can cook and stay warm for free. Grassroots DIY movements have a long-standing history of informing officialdom. Hey, the underground artist, the underground author, the underground politician, the underground activist, the underground athlete, whatever, is oftentimes the darling of officialdom. And at a certain point, officialdom usurps those movements. You see it reflected in real estate. You see it reflected in Urban Outfitters advertisement. You see it reflected in changing attitudes about issues, be it healthcare, social, racial justice, gay rights, cannabis, student loans. I mean, you pick your issue. The grassroots movements, whether they're demonstrative in its entirety or part demonstrative and part practical. In other words, the homeless shelter, the unhoused shelter at City Hall, both a demonstration, but also super serving people who actually need it. You can walk and chew gum at the same time. But frankly, you don't have to. Because what Sanchez and Roias and everybody involved in this project has accomplished is saying to a capitalistic system and a system of power right now that you've got Elon Musk and other people who are approaching unfathomable wealth, the $1 trillion mark, at the same time as there are people on a 16-degree night who are calling a coordinated entry system that you're waiting 2.5 hours, you get through and you don't have a bed. Now you can say, Bill, that's just not how the real world works. You got to look at how the world works, the real world. And to that I'd say, well, what's your definition of the real world? Is it the structures of power that we've created, that we've installed? Or is it actually what is contained inside the vessel that your body is? You don't have to be particularly spiritual or desire a higher level of consciousness or reflection to understand that somewhere inside of us, there's a feeling, there's a notion of right and wrong. And some people have deluded themselves into thinking, well, it's just the way the world is. There's nothing you can do about it, man. There's going to be winners and losers. And, unfortunately, you can't do a homeless shelter at the City Hall. We don't have the fire code. And there's people who get paid $150,000, $350,000 a year to take care of this. Guess what? They're not doing the job, man. Some of them are trying. Some of them are doing great work. But it's simply not enough. And that's where the people come in. That's what Sanchez and Roias brought to the table. Courage. Conviction. Punk rock, man. And so while officialdom is going to scoff at it, deep down inside, they're also looking at it and they're saying, hey, wait a second. What facilities do we have at our disposal that we can do the very same thing? And we'll staff it with security. We'll staff it with medical. And by the way, on a volunteer basis, there was security and medical at the facility, at the City Hall, and at the DaVinci Center. But the state, they'll look at what happened, and they'll gain something from it. That's how it goes. That's how movements happen. You can send out press releases. You can yell and scream on Twitter. You can attend rallies. You can advocate for change. You can run for office, and then you get there, and you don't want to lose your parking spot, and you don't want to have a minimal standing inside the General Assembly. So you go along to get along, and then 10 years go by, and you ask yourself, what did you actually accomplish? We need people who are not afraid to stand up to the system at a fundamental level. That's who we need in our society. That's who we need in our government right now. It's not enough to just say, hey, let's hope that, maybe they'll have a couple of meetings, get the bottled water out, maybe get some bagels at the meeting, taxpayer-funded bagels and cream cheese and some muffins, and you sit there and you get the electronic whiteboard out and you draw, this is what we got to do, How about some passion? How about some freaking passion? This is not a political issue. The crisis of the unhoused is not a political issue. Yes, politics on a parliamentary basis determine the people who will be in a position to make change. And that's the thing that happened in Providence when you get people like Roias and Sanchez on that city council. They were duly elected, and they didn't obfuscate who they are and what they represent when they ran for office. People voted them because they knew that's the type of voice that they needed. We're not going to make massive overnight change. You're not going to get a third-party candidate elected president. But at the grassroots level, at the municipal level, this is why I care so much about Rhode Island and so much about Providence and Newport and South County and the Blackstone Valley and the East Bay and the whole thing. Because this is where we can do something about the world that we're living in. If you're not, and again, you don't have to walk around with your head down, buried in the sand, and be completely, feel like everything is dystopian. But you know what I say? Donald Trump is out there. He's talking about buying, what are you going to invade Greenland now? They want to do that. You know why? Because they know climate change is real. The ice is going to melt, and it's going to expose unbelievable mineral, unbelievable oil opportunity. They want the Panama Canal. This is all geopolitical, post-Monroe Doctrine, globalization of the American empire. You know what? You're not going to do anything about that. I mean, what are we going to do about that? Really? I mean, we can talk about it. We should. Understand what's happening. We should understand what's happening across the globe. We should understand what's happening in Gaza. We should understand what's happening throughout Africa right now. We should understand what's happening all over Eastern Europe. We should understand what's happening in Central and South America. We should understand what's happening in Ashaway, Rhode Island, too. The difference is, in Ashaway, Rhode Island, in our backyard, we can actually make structural change and impact. But it's going to take courage, and it's going to take defying officialdom. And when you do it, even though you're going to get the mayor annoyed, and again, the mayor, I hear people say, oh, Smiley, this, that, he's an evil guy. No, he's not. He's a man of government and structure and proper practices and so on and so forth. If you haven't learned that about Brett Smiley now, you're not paying attention. But he's a good person, and he's going to sit there, I hope, and say, okay, what do we learn from this situation that Roias and Sanchez and everybody got involved in with this City Hall pop-up shelter? And to understand how these movements work, again, you need to look deep down underground. There's endless examples of it. I recommend punk rock, 1980s. And all around this country right now, in little pockets that you would never even expect, These things are happening on a daily basis. No one's getting paid. No one's getting rich. People might be losing money as a result of it. It's not part of the nonprofit industrial complex or anything of that sort. Not to knock it. We need the nonprofit industrial complex because that's where a lot of the actual implementation comes from. And a lot of the smartest people in our state are there. It's all got to be in harmony. So for everybody that's out there that wants to knock what took place at Providence City Hall, and you want to call them delusional or just a bunch of kids or just a bunch of this or that, that's your prerogative, but you're wrong. And history shows us that. The crisis in this state is totally unacceptable, and it cannot be allowed to continue. And it doesn't mean that you have planning sessions and seminars and specialization. No, it means you've got a warm building at your disposal and volunteers that can help. If the choice is open the building and let people in or let them stay outside and freeze, then I don't know how anybody could argue that. And we should be doing more of it. Are they going to open up the State House? Are they going to open up the Providence Place Mall? No, they're not going to do that. But maybe they will look at this and say, geez, you know what? We got to give me inventory. And where's the churches, by the way? The tax-exempt churches. Where's Brown University, tax-exempt Brown University? They got facilities left, right, and center right now. Students aren't even there right now. When are they going to do something about it? You're getting off without paying taxes. Now, you generate economic activity and you generate a lot of intellectual growth in this community, and we're better off for you being here. No one's saying that. But, geez, they're not stepping up. So what happens is you got a couple of councilors that step up, and naturally officialdom is going to resist it because they don't want to be outmaneuvered. It's punk rock, man. It's fundamental. And again, you can laugh and you can say, oh, yeah, there they are. Just a bunch of, you know what you are then? You're just like Saturday Night Live and CNN and the whole corporate media around Occupy Wall Street. Go watch that. Type it into YouTube. Go watch CNN or Saturday Night Live's coverage of Occupy Wall Street. It was a concerted effort to demean and diminish the impact of that movement. Was that movement flawed? Yes, definitely. Were the demonstrations in the parks exclusively where the action was happening? No. Was the disbursement of information on the New York subway system and in other major transit points fundamental to what took place there? Yes. In a pre-social media era, well, we had MySpace and kind of Facebook, but I don't know if you can count that. Did enough people leave that movement where there was an appetite for change that ultimately resulted in both Sanders and Trump? Definitely. Populism's become a bad word because it's become associated with fascist and far-right populism. But the solution to what we need to do is to go back to a populist place that comes from the origins of organized society. Going to be tough to do it. You couldn't get Sanders through the Democratic Party. Not going to happen. You're not going to beat that system that way. You're not going to beat it, obviously, militarily. You're not going to beat it financially. The only way you can do it, look in your backyard. Take action. Take chances. Put yourself on the line. Study history. Study the present. Love is a word that's completely misconstrued. You think of in love, you think of the love between family or the love between friends. My closest friends and I, we always say I love you when we leave each other. For the most part, anyway. But it's gotten to a point now where on a societal basis, we've lost complete connection with that. It's tragedy. Again, becomes very easily mockable. But in reality, what Sanchez, Roias, and everybody who was at that shelter last night at the DaVinci Center, and everybody who was there in the very bold City Hall event 2 nights ago, what they demonstrated, you can also boil it down to one word: love. I'm Bill Bartholomew. We'll talk soon. Hey, thanks for stopping by Bartholomew Town. For more content, follow me on Instagram at Bill Bartholomew.